Hello, Star Trek fans. Welcome to ReBingeIT. This is the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we are rebinging Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 3, Episode 8, Future's End, Part 1. This episode aired November 6th, 1996, and it's got some 90s faces in it.
Yes.
Before we start on this one, anything to say about last week's episode, which was Sacred Ground?
No, it could have been a better episode, but I'd enjoy talking about it with you.
I think it gets treated unfairly. I think It's a good episode. I enjoyed it. Well, you've got the notes this week, so...
Yes, I do.
Whenever you're ready.
We open on Earth in the High Sierras in 1967. With a guy who looks to be a hippie. He's out in the middle of nowhere with his campfire, and a bright light comes crashing from the sky, shaking the ground and landing near his camp. As he peers through the trees and the glowing light, he says, "Far out." And that was just in case we didn't know he was a hippie from the 60s.
Yeah.
And we go into the opening credits.
But the close-up on his hands, he is not a 20-year-old hippie.
And his face, yeah.
And his face. I think they needed some soft focus.
Well, we also do see he has like a distinctive rose tattoo on his forearm.
Yeah.
And that'll come up again later. We also don't actually see what crashed, so that adds a little bit to the tension.
Yeah, they just show a light. I thought it was to save money on effects.
It probably was. Now in Janeway's ready room, she's telling Tuvok she's taking up tennis again. Tuvok, of course, provides very helpful advice saying, if you maintained eye contact with the ball, your serve would be more effective. And I think you'd find Vulcans would be absolutely infuriating. I guarantee they would be, well, actually, about everything.
It's kind of like when I'm working on a puzzle and you come over and say, it's just pattern matching.
Yes, but I'm doing that deliberately.
Oh, uh-huh.
I'm doing that as amusing irony.
Oh,
they would mean it.
You're trolling. Got it.
Yes.
Is she purposely missing the tennis ball here so that she doesn't knock the ball around in the room?
I assume so.
Or is she actually missing it? And then she hits it right as she tells somebody to come in and then almost hits Tuvok in the head.
Well, the informal meeting is cut short by a red alert. A spatial rift has opened right in front of Voyager and a small ship has emerged. Harry reports its subspace signature is Federation. There's no response to hails, and the ship just opens fire on Voyager. Shields are down, con is offline, and phasers have no effect on it.
Yet again, we see a spatial rift or some kind of very strange anomaly coming towards us, and we don't move.
Reverse course.
Yeah.
Harry reports Voyager's molecular structure is coming apart. And my response is, again, didn't the Caretaker's X try to do this to Voyager already?
Yeah, it's a common theme, that and brain damage.
Yes. Chakotay orders a high-energy polaron pulse to be sent through the deflector to disrupt the weapon, and it works. Once again, demonstrating the most useful piece of gear on a ship is the deflector.
Yeah.
To quote Homer and Donuts, is there anything they cannot do for you?
Yeah, and Chakotay is very useful here.
Yeah.
He just jumps right in with this idea.
I wonder if that comes from, again, the Marquis having to think a lot more on their feet against a much superior opponent, or two opponents, including the Federation.
Well, maybe, but they always show him with his terrible ideas. Like, oh, we'll stop and they'll fly right by us, or I don't know, whatever his crazy ideas are.
Finally, the ship hails them, and a Captain Braxton of Federation timeship Eon appears on view screen. He's from 500 years in the future, 29th century for those keeping track. He tells them Voyager is responsible for a temporal explosion in his century that destroys Earth and the entire solar system. His mission is to stop this from happening. They must not resist. And my note says, we're a bit early for resistance is futile in Voyager.
Yeah. You said he was 500 years in the future?
Yes.
This is a if you know, you know reference, but this actor, his name is Alan Royal, and when I went to look up and see what else he'd been in, he was in Hot Frosty.
Really?
Yes.
That's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
Janeway protests, but Braxton says debris from Voyager was found at the explosion. There's no time, and he just starts firing his weapon again. And if he was a time traveler, wouldn't he have like infinite time? Why is there such a rush?
Yeah, I don't know.
Take your time, figure things out, then destroy them.
I think he might have lost his cool sooner, a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so he might have been panicking after seeing...
Yeah, something.
I assume this mission was not authorized. He just took it upon himself.
Well, this is before the Time Wars then, right? So, yeah, maybe he did, but why would he just take it upon himself? I guess maybe unless he was already a little loopy.
Right, he might have not been the best candidate for a time pilot.
Right.
Which was also the name of a really great early video game.
I do like the idea of a Federation time ship, though. That's pretty cool. Even though the ship itself is a little hokey, it comes through and it's just got like 3 really bright lights on top of it.
We get a better view of the ship later.
Yeah.
Janeway isn't convinced. She tells Chakotay she's not going to sacrifice the crew after a 10-second conversation.
Yeah, from a loony.
She orders Tuvok to adjust the deflector to overload Braxton's weapon. It works. The time ship is offline and it's been damaged. The spatial rift starts to close, pulling the ship in. Tom can't get Helm back online, and they're pulled in too. And we cut to a great little space shot of Voyager being pulled into the rift, and then vanishing. And on the bridge, everything fades to white. Great ending to that scene, I thought. Everyone's now picking themselves up on the bridge. Voyager took damage, and Harry reports the rift is closed. Tom gets a view screen back online, and we see Earth. Janeway tries hailing Starfleet, but there's no response. And Tuvok is picking up a multitude of EM signals, putting it on speaker.
Yeah, I can't remember if Harry says that's what he's doing, but that is what they do, because then they start hearing all these different voices and like conversations between people and TV shows. Yep.
Right, yeah, it's a real garbled mash of like there's phone calls and sports announcements.
Right.
A surprised Janeway says, the question isn't where we are, it's when we are. And Harry, of course, figures it out. They're in 1996.
Okay, at this point,
Yep.
Let's stop what we're doing, do a quick check on how they jumped forward in the whale movie. Boom, we're home.
Oh, yeah.
Pull out the VCR.
Yeah.
Watch.
Pull out one of those data tapes.
Yeah, come on.
Right. They should have that as part of the record.
The answer's right in front of you.
So I think we now know this is a time travel episode. And to cut down on sets and costumes, the time travel is to, oddly enough, the same year they're making the show.
Yep.
Well, they can't find the time ship in orbit, but Tuvok does find a subspace reading in the northern hemisphere that shouldn't exist for another 100 years. He tracks the signal down to Los Angeles. Janeway says, we've got to go down there. That ship is the only way back to their own century, apart from what Kim said, which was the whale movie.
Yeah, the whale movie. Yeah, Janeway she has a few moments in her life where she's gleeful. This is one. Oh, we have to go down there.
I know.
The only thing that would have made it better is if she could have taken her giant phaser rifle.
Yes, she does seem very excited to do this.
Yeah.
She takes all the senior officers on the away team, which I think would be a really bad protocol for doing.
Yeah, you should leave the first officer behind, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that what the protocol is supposed to be?
Right. And there's also a very big moment here. She gives Harry the bridge.
Yeah, that's cute.
And I think this is the first time on the show he gets it.
Yeah. And we're lucky he doesn't crash the whole ship.
Oh, yeah, like when they let Deanna drive.
Yeah.
So off we go to a very stereotypical TV interpretation of what California looks like.
What do you mean? It does look like that.
It was actually filmed at Santa Monica Pier.
Yeah. I think it was just the normal people who were hanging out at the pier. Although not really. They cut out all the sort of normal people, who might be of normal-shaped bodies.
Well, yeah. Everyone there looks a little too much like a swimsuit model or deliberately outlandish.
I mean, we see that normally on a California beach, but you also see the normal people. Yeah.
It does. This kind of reminds me of Last Action Hero, where they're in LA and it's like a movie set. It does look maybe a little bit more like San Diego Comic-Con.
A little bit, yeah. And it's funny because Tuvok says something about we could have just worn our uniforms. We wouldn't have stood out here. And he's not wrong. But I think like Janeway and Chakotay in these fancy suits, well, not really fancy, but in full suits, they stand out. It's like, who's hanging out at the beach in a suit?
Well, Janeway, of course, is the one actually wearing the best outfit of all of them.
Yeah, she looks amazing.
Yeah.
And it's a different all-white outfit than the one she had on like a couple of episodes ago.
Right. And for some reason, though, Chakotay looks like a cast extra from Miami Vice, which was like 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, his outfit looks out of date and too big. It doesn't fit him. I can't remember. Were we in baggy clothes at this point in the 90s? We might have been.
No, that was 80s.
No?
That would have been late 80s. We were way past that.
Yeah, but I mean, you and I met in the 90s and you didn't like my baggy clothes. Was I 10 years behind everybody else? Could have been.
Well, it was also cold in the Midwest, so layers were a thing.
You needed more clothes.
Yeah.
But nobody's clothes look great except for Janeway. She looks amazing.
Yep.
So you've got Chakotay in his weird outfit. And for some reason, they weirded out his hair. His hair looks ridiculous.
Yeah, and nobody is wearing a vest.
No, nobody is wearing a vest. And Tom is wearing the highest waisted jeans I've seen in 30 years for sure.
I know, the jeans were crazy.
They're called mom jeans now. They look ridiculous.
Was that a thing then?
I guess. I mean, the lower rise jeans certainly were not out yet at this point, no. But yeah, he looks funny. And then I don't know what they're doing with Tuvok to try to make him look hip or something. Okay. So yeah, they're all wearing wild outfits.
Okay, I have some headcanon here.
Yeah.
Janeway makes a comment when they get in the turbo lift about Tom has some experience of this time period.
Right.
The outfits that they're wearing, they're Tom-inspired ones.
Oh, they probably are.
He's like either picked up on what the cultural stereotypes were at the time, and he's like dressed everyone like that.
It could be, and he's also sort of mixing time periods up a bit, right? Because he does make some mistakes later, and so maybe he got a few things mixed up.
Right. So I'm blaming that on Tom, but it's also kind of a funny snapshot, I think, as well, because some of it is real and some of it is fanciful.
Yeah, I do like that he says, well, we're going to need a lot of money, because they hardly ever talk about that. It's like, yes, you are.
Yeah. So they start scanning for the subspace signature, and as Janeway is like trying to hide her tricorder.
Yeah, why?
We had cell phones back then.
We had cell phones, and also we had those handheld video games that looked exactly like that.
Yeah. She's just got her, what was the one? The flip fold Game Boy at the time. Although I think the flip open Game Boy, that was a Game Boy Advance, and I don't think that came until later.
I guess yeah. I mean, we had those even older ones. There was that handheld football game. That was before the 90s. I think that might have been in the 80s.
Yeah.
Where it just had the little dots and the lines. Oh my God, we would play that game for hours. It's so ridiculous.
I don't think people were walking around with that one in the 90s.
No, I don't know. I bet we were in the Midwest. Maybe they weren't on the beach. It's in Los Angeles, but I bet we were doing it in South Dakota.
Well, there's a little bit more California humor as when they're scanning, there's a rollerblader and like a bikini model and a couple of punks. It's really pretty funny.
Boom boxes.
Yeah.
And there's a guy on stilts.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, they got everything going on.
They kind of play this up of Janeway and Chakotay finding it all quite odd, but this is where that doesn't fit. If you're constantly meeting different races, cultures, species, none of this could remotely surprise you. Remember Deep Space Nine with those aliens that looked like they had a box on their head? They appeared in several of the early episodes, and we sort of laughed about the wacky outfits.
Yeah.
But if that's your normal experience when you go to a space station or to another planet, nothing here should be surprising to you.
Well, it makes you wonder, what does California look like in their time? Because Starfleet Academy is in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So they've got the beach right there. What are they seeing there? I guess, San Francisco's a lot colder, but still.
Oh, Earth is all turned into squares.
Maybe. But it's different, though, than when you go to an alien planet, you expect aliens.
Yeah.
When you go to your own planet, you probably expect people to look like you or how you're used to them looking when you go to Earth. So you might be more surprised by things that you don't recognize.
But I think people in that future would pick up on alien races or styles or cultures and would be impacted by these other races. So you'd see humans maybe using the hairstyle of some particular...
We'd have alien influencers.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly.
Maybe what's happened is they've killed social media in the future. Oh, thank God.
Oh, okay. I just find it kind of funny.
Oh, yeah. They're playing it up for humor.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
It's kind of like Spock and Kirk in the whale movie. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Or whoever gets on the bus and says, what's exact change? I mean, it's just all the same kind of humor.
Janeway also tells Chakotay there was the Hermosa earthquake, and Santa Monica will be under 200 meters of water by 2047.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, I think this continues that theme that California is just one good earthquake away from sinking completely into the ocean.
I've heard that my whole life.
Yeah.
There'd be one. I mean, it goes back to the original Superman movie, right? Before.
Oh, yeah. No, that's
one
true.
earthquake, you're all underwater. Mm-hmm.
Janeway tracks down the reading, and we see it's coming from what looks like a homeless guy who's digging through a trash can. Cut now to the Griffiths Observatory, another real place in LA, which thankfully appears to be clear of Terminators for a change.
Yeah.
It's also of significance to fans of Fallout. Inside, there are lots of computers and cool-looking terminals. A young woman is lounging in a chair when her computer starts beeping. She hits a few keys, and we see a plot on the screen of something orbiting Earth. And she just says, way.
Well, because first she says, no way.
Yeah.
You forgot that part.
Well, the woman is a very young Sarah Silverman, which makes me feel really old because we're like the same age.
Mm-hmm. There's a quick scene where Tom and Tuvok are, like, they split up, and Tom and Tuvok are walking off looking for this signal before Janeway finds it. And Tom takes his shirt off because it's nice and sunny, and he tells Tuvok to do the same, and Tuvok is like, no, the radiation levels are unsafe. And Tom says that all Vulcans are hypochondriacs. That's really, to me, quite funny because it's like logic just makes them overly cautious and anxious.
Oh.
It's like people with high anxiety, just saying, no, we're just being realistic. Instead, the Vulcans are like, it's just logical.
Hey, that's a good observation. I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, that little throwaway line really made me chuckle.
Now we cut to Ed Begley Jr. putting a 28-pin dip IC onto a table, declaring, it's crap. It's a nice visual shot because they shoot this
from the bottom.
Yeah, through a glass table.
And you see one of its little legs is bent, like all the ones in our house that we have.
We see Ed is in a nice big office and is chewing out a vendor for making poor quality chips for their next hypercomputer. And I have to point out here, that is clearly a 28-pin dip chip. That's not powering any high-end computers at that point in time.
Yeah.
Top-end stuff at this point is pin grid array or it's quad flat pack. It's not dip. So I actually am going to agree with Ed here and say it's crap if it's in that packaging and trying to power their supercomputer.
Well, also, this may be an alternate version of reality, especially when you get to the point of something that he invented. That's not even a real thing, right?
I have a comment on that, but we'll continue.
Also here in this scene, Ed Begley Jr., the actor, takes off his jacket and he's got a polo shirt underneath. And I was just like, a polo shirt and a sports jacket, a true monster of the 90s.
Oh, that couldn't be any more 90s if you tried.
Yeah.
Well, Ed gets a call and we learn his name is Henry Starling. It's from the young woman at the observatory telling him she's picked up a gamma emission profile that matches the frequency he provided. Starling is very interested in this, and she wants to take it public. But he downplays it, telling her to just monitor and collect data for the meantime. And then we see the tattoo on Starling's wrist. He was the hippie from the 1960s.
Was that the entire point of that tattoo?
Oh, yeah. I think that was just to show that Starling, it was the same guy.
That it was him. Yeah. I mean, you also could have just looked at his face.
That would have been a giveaway as well.
Yeah.
We also learn that the young woman's name is Rain. Back in the observatory, Rain is tired of waiting and transmits a greeting message aimed at Voyager. On board Voyager, they're still repairing. Transporters are offline, and using emergency transporters would mean they would need to be less than 10 kilometers from the surface. An ensign reports to Harry they picked up a transmission from the surface aimed at them. They put it on view screen, and we see the message, "Greetings from the people of Earth." And Harry realizes somebody's seen them. I thought that was kind of funny because on that screen, it shows the man and the woman from the plaque on Voyager, the spacecraft.
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's a plaque and a gold record on the spaceship Voyager, the actual probe we sent out.
Are you talking about Voyager?
Yeah. Voyager was Voyager 6, I think. We only actually have 2 Voyagers, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I thought you meant the USS Voyager, but yeah, okay, yeah, I get you.
I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, that was cute. And the ensign in the background says, "Oh, should we answer this message?" And Harry just says, "Absolutely not."
That was Harry's version of the great line from Sulu with the, "Should we tell Starfleet? Are you kidding?"
Are you kidding?
Back to Santa Monica, the team is following the homeless guy who's putting up signs about the end of the world, and Harry calls to inform Janeway of the message. So she sends Tom and Tuvok to investigate the observatory. This episode is pretty cool because now we split up and there's like 4 threads running at the same time.
2 things. One, Chakotay does not know how to walk normally in those baggy pants. If you go and watch the scene where they're following the homeless guy, he looks like he doesn't know how to walk. It's so funny.
Do you think he annoyed the costuming producer or whoever, and they're putting him in terrible clothes deliberately?
And making his hair bad because he looks ridiculous. The other thing in this scene is that when Janeway's badge dings, her comm badge, you see a bunch of people who are walking by just randomly. They all look at their cell phones.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Nice.
Yeah. I didn't notice it the first time, but I saw it the second time through.
It's funny when you watch a show that does something like this and how you realize nobody has a camera or is filming.
It's when there are science fiction shows from the 90s and before, and they just sort of completely missed the camera.
Oh,
that was going to be so big. Even if they had different kinds of communication devices, whether it was the Star Trek comm badge or whatever else, but they just missed the advent of video
everywhere.
Being so available everywhere. I think a lot of it has to do with storage, because I think about one of my early jobs at a startup where we had sensors all over the place and we could gather tons of data, but as soon as it was a video sensor, we just ran out of space all the time. We never had enough storage.
Right.
So I think, storage was very different in the early 2000s from what it is now.
Oh, definitely. Well, this was the start of the rise of the MP3. And being able to store large amounts of music. I mean, this was exactly the time when we were starting to get into computers that could run good compression algorithms. After sending Tom and Tuvok off to the observatory, Janeway and Chakotay follow the homeless guy back to where he lives. He thinks they're social workers until he recognizes Janeway and says, "Voyager." And Janeway sees his Starfleet badge and realizes this is Captain Braxton. Braxton rants a bit. He's been stuck on Earth for 30 years. Even once being put in a mental asylum.
Yeah, well.
He outlines his theory of what happened. Someone from the 20th century stole his time ship, tried to fly it into the future without calibrating the temporal matrix, and it caused the explosion he saw. Chakotay asks who stole the ship, and Braxton replies, Starling. So Ed Begley Jr. is the bad guy.
Yeah, I think we knew that when he took off his sports jacket.
The true sign of a villain.
Mm-hmm.
Janeway wants to stop this from happening, but Braxton points out debris from Voyager was found at the explosion, telling her, "You will be destroyed too." The conversation is interrupted when the cops arrive because Braxton's been putting these end-of-the-world signs up, and he ends up running off. Janeway just says, "We'll have to worry about him later," and they set off to find Starling.
When the cops pull up, Janeway and Chakotay they're in this alley talking to this guy, right? And when the cops pull up, Janeway and Chakotay just step to the side and try to act like nonchalant. It's like, no, okay, this is very suspicious. These 2 people in suits are just in this random alley talking to this homeless guy who they just happen to come and talk to. But no, they just stand over there like, no, everything's normal. No big deal.
You would think the policeman might be a little interested in what they were talking about, because they could be family trying to get this guy off the street, which would mean that wouldn't be his problem. So
they could also be human traffickers. They could be a lot of things.
Yeah,
buying drugs. It could be anything.
Back to Starling, who's discovered that Rain has shared her findings, and he tells a suited henchman to go to the observatory, get her data, and get rid of her. Classic villain stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
Off to the observatory.
Wait, you're not even going to mention the pinball machine? Is it because you don't know what game it was?
I do not know what game it was.
And it makes no noise. It's the only pinball machine ever invented that makes no noise.
I will admit, I did not see what the pinball machine was.
No, me either.
Off to the observatory, and Tom and Tuvok roll up in a nice new truck, borrowed from a dealership.
Well... Janeway says, "Do whatever you have to do," which is a very dangerous thing to say to Tom.
Yes, that is as bad as giving Nog a piece of paper authorizing him to do what's necessary.
Oh, right.
Mars O'Brien learned the hard way there. They quickly find Rain's office and start digging through her data, but they're interrupted and pretend that they got lost on the tour. There's a little bit of a connection here, as Tom seems to share the same appreciation for old horror movies as Rain, and she invites him to the planetarium show, which he has to decline. After they leave, she tries to use her computer, but it crashes with the funniest fatal system error.
Yeah, giant skull and crossbones.
Yes, and of course, as it's Star Trek, it uses that old classic Apple Mac font for the system error.
Even though that was not a Mac, I don't think.
Yeah, it's much more exciting than just the old... Remember, the Apple used to have... I think at the time, just used to have the bomb symbols when something went wrong.
Oh, yeah. And we would just get the blue screen in Windows.
Yeah.
I can't believe in this scene when Tom is just chatting with her, he casually says he went to Starfleet Academy. Like, come on, Tom. She's like, what?
Well, I think that was a bit of a slip, but I did like it when he said, oh, it's on the East Coast.
Yeah, East Coast school.
Well, while Tom was talking to her, Tuvok downloaded all her data and corrupted her computer. But she's not taking this and chases after the two of them. But following her outside is Starling's henchman, armed with a phaser. He shoots, completely missing, but disintegrating Tom's borrowed truck. And Tuvok returns fire, knocking the phaser from the henchman's hand. And I'll point out, destroying that truck could cause significant effects in the timeline. For a start, the person who was responsible for it at the dealership might have got fired. That could have a big impact on their life. And then second thing is, that truck might have been important at some point in history. Maybe it ran somebody over, and that affected the timeline. Or maybe it took someone to hospital, also affecting the timeline. That could have really significant impacts.
Well, remember in Prodigy, they frequently talked about small changes didn't matter. And if a truck disappears, another truck can replace it. You know what I mean?
But that flies in the face of the butterfly effect.
Yeah, but that's kind of how Star Trek deals with time.
Waving its hand.
Right? Well, they're a little bit looser about it, and very rarely, if something happens to somebody's past, does it immediately happen to them in the present, whatever place that they're in. Star Trek just deals with time differently.
I would agree with that. I think actually that works pretty well from a story standpoint. Because if you follow the butterfly effect, everything could destroy your timeline.
Yeah, and I don't want to watch that.
But if you follow the Star Trek writing approach of, look, the little things don't matter. The really big things, they need to happen.
Because otherwise, if every little thing could basically end humanity, then the time travel stories would be, you wouldn't write them. They'd be too devastating every time.
Right. Yeah, it saves you from significant problems later on in the writing.
Yeah, and remember in Picard season 2, we actually leave somebody in the past on purpose. Like, we let him choose to stay in the past. It's like, okay, that no other time travel story would say that would have no implications.
With the henchmen disarmed, they manage to escape in Rain's old camper van. And there's a big ouch here, because if you watch, the stuntman who's playing Tuvok jumps into the moving truck, and he takes a real hit to his side.
Whacks his hip.
It's like, that looked painful. That was an ow.
You could hear it. They may have added that sound. You might not have actually been able to hear it, but the sound makes you think, oh, that hurt.
Yeah. On board Voyager, Harry is recording a log. They're checking to see if anyone else has detected Voyager, and he's got Neelix and Kes watching media broadcasts. And this is a funny interlude because Kes and Neelix are both transfixed when they discover soap operas.
Oh, back when soaps were a thing.
Yeah. Off to Earth, and Chakotay and Janeway have broken into Starling's ChronoWorks building and are searching his office. They find a force field but can't scan beyond it. Janeway takes no time breaking into his computer and says, let's see what Henry's been up to all these years.
Do you think when Chakotay says, oh, it's a series of pictographs, did he mean icons?
Yes, I think he just means the icons at the side of the screen.
That was funny.
Tuvok and Tom are still in the van with Rain, but comms are offline, and Rain wants them to take her home and not keep her van. I guess she isn't worried about an assassin armed with a disintegrator waiting for her at her house.
Yeah, she's being a little cavalier, but also I think Sarah Silverman is pretty good in this episode, but she's a bit over the top in this,
Really?
This scene. Yeah, like she, towards the end of the scene, she just sort of falls back into her seat like, ugh. And I don't know, it's a little over the top.
Oh, I kind of liked her.
Mm-hmm. She is cute.
She demands they tell her what's going on, and Trom tries a kind of lame excuse about them being secret agents, but she's not really buying it.
Yeah, and he's also talking about the KGB and the
Yes.
Soviet satellites, and she's like, I think you're in the wrong time.
He does manage to convince her that they're on the same side, and she seems to at least be going along with them for now. Back in Starling's office, Janeway has discovered all his designs use technology from the timeship, noting he introduced the first isograted circuit in 1969, 2 years after Braxton's ship crashed. Advances in computers was all from Starling's crude understanding of 29th century technology.
I don't remember how this episode or this two-parter ends, because this implies we're in a different timeline than what the rest of us are in.
Janeway and Chakotay come to the conclusion the computer age of the late 20th century shouldn't have happened, but it's part of their history. Leading on from what you said there, a little bit of an overanalysis here. Janeway makes a reference to isograted circuit, which I assume is something along the lines of an isolinear chip, which is clearly different from integrated circuit.
Right.
So I'm thinking, like your comment, this is an alternative timeline that kind of runs parallel to what the real timeline is. There really would be a computer revolution in integrated circuits. He just advanced things maybe a little bit earlier. So history's changed, but not a huge amount. So even if they fix everything, integrated circuits still become a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I purposely looked up isograted, and it's like, no, it only appears in Star Trek. Yeah. And that just really made me think, okay, then we're in a different timeline of some kind.
Exactly. Yeah. Because, they use isolinear chips. So I'm thinking the ISO, is this related to a similar sort of earlier version of that technology?
Yeah, could be. Okay.
Janeway also discovers Starling is getting the timeship ready for launch. Chakotay points out that if they hadn't fought Braxton, none of this would have happened. And there's a funny conversation here where Janeway tells Chakotay, time travel. Since my first day in the job as Starfleet captain, I swore I'd never let myself get caught up in one of these godforsaken paradoxes. The irony meter just exploded based on what happens later in the show and in the events that make up Star Trek Prodigy.
Right. And it's funny to think that you could prevent yourself from getting caught up in one. Because if you could prevent it, then it probably wouldn't have happened. So, yeah, she's being a little bit funny. But she also says the line, the future is the past is the future. It all gives me a headache. And the way she delivers it is, I keep saying this, but Janeway is the funny captain. She's so funny when she says that. And just the way she delivers the line.
Well, she brings to it a sort of a human sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's possibly in her control. Most things that happen to Starfleet captains are not what they would want.
Right.
I want to go and study these gaseous anomalies and not have something weird happen. Not a chance. Janeway continues digging in the computer and manages to find the launch bay for the timeship. And it's right next to Starling's office. And as is typical in Voyager, no one is standing watch, checking the doors, or making sure that they're not disturbed.
No, we're both looking at the computer.
So Starling and his henchmen just wander in, wielding the phaser, and take Chakotay and Janeway by surprise. Janeway tries reasoning with Starling, telling him of the disaster and how they need to take the ship back. Harry hails Janeway, and she gives him the go-ahead to start uploading Starling's database. But Harry's forced to stop when Starling threatens to kill the captain. Harry's torn about taking the ship lower to make an emergency transport to rescue the captain, and he thinks for a moment and then gives the order, take us down. I like that. Harry's learning something from Janeway. A person of action.
Yeah, just do it.
Yes, precisely. Sterling's now at his computer and is complaining that Voyager took almost 3,000 gigabytes of data. So that's like 3 terabytes. You can buy consumer drives bigger than that now.
Yeah, but in a few seconds.
Well, they obviously had 100 gigabit Ethernet then.
Just turn off the monitor and keep doing it.
Yeah, that would have made sense.
Yeah. Okay, I stopped.
Yeah, why would it all be coming up on the screen?
Exactly. Well, yes, I wondered that too. It's not generally how that works, but...
When I've cloned hard disks, you normally get like a little boring bar just showing the percentage and not actually showing you all the data.
Right.
Starling says this doesn't matter. They're not going to stop him. And Janeway pulls out the big guns, at least metaphorically, saying, she's got a starship in orbit. She'll vaporize the entire building. So negotiations are pretty much over. But before things go any further, Janeway, then Chakotay are beamed out. as Starling shouts at his minion to kill them, and we cut to a low-flying Voyager over the California coast.
That was fun.
Okay, I'm not an aviation expert, but B'Elanna earlier told Harry they'd need to be closer than 10K to do an emergency transport. That's about 32,000 feet. Voyager, in these shots, is way lower than 30,000 feet.
They're being dramatic.
I'm saying at most, Voyager's like maybe 6,000, 10,000 feet at absolute maximum. Back on the bridge, Janeway immediately jumps back into command, ordering Chakotay to disable the time ship's force field and for B'Elanna to beam it into a cargo bay. She also congratulates Harry's sense of timing for his first day in the big chair.
We missed an opportunity here. Yeah, we're trying to beam up the time ship, but that's the wrong thing. Beam up Ed Begley Jr. and then drop him in the ocean.
Right. Beam him up and his minion with the phaser.
Into the brig or whatever, you know.
You've taken the prize. What can he do now? You can then spend the next week interrogating him to get the codes for the time ship.
Well, and he already knows about the future, so it's not like you're revealing anything to him. So I really thought they missed a trick there because he immediately starts fighting back. And it's just like, okay, but even when he's fighting back, beam him on board.
Yeah, he doesn't have a dampening field or anything. Well, he doesn't know about that, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, because then they couldn't have beamed through it.
Right. They start the transport, but unfortunately, Starling is pretty good. He remodulates the matter stream, disrupting the transport, and then things get really bad. He starts accessing Voyager's computer through the transport link.
That's one smart hippie.
Janeway realizes he's using 29th century technology against them. I think that's interesting because if you had technology 500 years ahead of where Voyager is, Voyager would look primitive in comparison. It gets worse. Starling is getting into the propulsion systems. And finally, Janeway disengages the transport, which I think would be the very first move you would make if he was accessing your main computer.
Again, you just beam that guy up. Or, I mean, you have lots of options, but we don't do any of them.
How about beaming down a security detail?
Beam down a little grenade. A little flash grenade. Boop.
Yeah, a flashbang. Followed by a security detail.
Yep.
Janeway orders to get back into orbit, and then Starling hails them. He's downloaded part of their database. He knows who she is, and that she's from the 24th century. And he tells her, "Looks like I have the home field advantage." God, he's so annoyingly smug.
I like how here she just hangs up on him like, oh, God.
Yeah. Kes now calls the bridge, saying the doctor is missing, and his program is actually gone. And we cut to Starling's office, where the doctor is standing, asking, "Where am I?" To make things a little worse, Neelix calls the bridge. He's found a local news program, and they watch on the view screen as a news report of Voyager flying above the city is shown. And we close on a very serious Janeway just sighing. To be continued.
Well, whoops, Harry. This is all your fault.
Yep. And again, that ship was below 30,000 feet.
Now, how did he get the doctor without the holographic projectors?
Well,
we make a whole big thing about how the doctor can't go anywhere because we only have the holographic projectors in two places.
Okay. 29th century technology. I think the projection technology is from the time ship.
Well, it must be. Hopefully they explain that or I'll be annoyed.
I'm not going to give you spoilers, but I'm pretty sure they do in the next part of it.
It's so funny when you don't want to give me spoilers. I have seen this show, but I don't remember. Like we were talking about doing a panel at Comic-Con of our favorite episodes. And it's like, okay, but I only remember the first 3 seasons that we've watched over the last year.
I'm still loath to give you any spoilers, even for the next episode.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Do you have over-analysis? I'm just looking at my notes and I do not really. So what do you have? I have one thing in mind.
Well, I think I talked about most of my over-analysis as we went through this thing. Here's the first thing. I disagree with Janeway's assertion that we'll deal with Braxton later. I think you should be doing everything possible to get Braxton back to Voyager. For a start, he has 29th century training and knowledge and expertise, which would be enormously helpful.
Yeah.
And he's your best chance for finding the ship and fixing this time incursion. He's very important.
He is, but he's also had 30 years to forget things. Like I just said, after 30 years, I don't remember this show.
Yeah.
he could very well have forgotten in 30 years all of his training.
That's true. I still think he is significantly more important. Next thing, and this is basically what you said, why aren't you beaming up Starling onto the ship? He knows about your technology. There's no contamination of the timeline. And you know now this guy is responsible for destroying Earth in the future. There's no reason not to beam him on board.
Yeah, or why can't we ever disable weapons remotely? Or beam the weapon out of the guy's hand, something.
That would make a lot of sense, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have any kind of dampening field.
Beam a book right over his head and just drop it on his head.
Also an excellent idea.
He just need a distraction. I got all kinds of ideas how to use the transporter.
Yeah. Next thing, when Rain told other people about this thing in orbit, surely she would have given the same gamma radiation profile that she was using. So any of these other scientists with access to an array or an antenna could have found it and said, oh yeah, there's something orbiting Earth. We don't know what it is. I can make a headcanon reason here that maybe some of the technology she was using that Starling had secretly given her.
Yeah.
And they don't know it's future tech that's scanning. They just think it's some, piece of equipment Starling gave them. So nobody else would be able to detect it.
Yeah, that would make sense. That's probably the case.
Yeah. And my final point, and I know we've talked about this, I see this very much as an alternative timeline because of the mention of the isogated chips.
Yeah, in 1996, yeah. Well, in 1967
is when he created it. Yeah, right.
Well, I don't remember how it ends, so I guess we'll see what happens. But yeah, I agree. I was thinking that too. Which just means, though, Voyager's not in the Alpha timeline, which is...
No, I still think it would be in the Alpha timeline. This is just a slight digression off the path. This is just one of those things that they need to fix.
Oh, I see. Well, the only thing I have in my overanalysis is how did Ed Begley Jr., the hippie who was sitting out in the desert or wherever he was, how did he get the resources to somehow take that ship, start studying it, and turn it into something? I mean, that to me is a little far-fetched. Even just because you have the technology doesn't mean you have, just randomly, this person also happens to have the ability to use it.
Headcanon time. The ship had a replicator on board. I mean, he does seem pretty smart. Maybe he was a former college student that had left for the wilds, lived a hippie lifestyle. So he figured out how to use some of the basic systems. He was able to replicate money, gold, valuables, and actually raise money that way. And then bring the ship in.
Maybe has some useful AI.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
But that's just, you know what that's telling us? That's saying that even in the 29th century, the passwords are still 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, that is the
Starfleet.
Big takeaway from this thing, of that even 500 years later, Starfleet does have 1, 2, 3, 4 as the password. Yeah.
Oh, Lord. It's so true.
I mean, I could also see that maybe Begley is actually a genius because he was able to very quickly use the 29th century technology to get a hold of Voyager and start downloading Voyager's computer. So it could be he is actually very, very smart.
Yeah, it could be. Well, I don't have anything in Women in the Future. Nothing really stands out to say there. And in Janeway's Leadership Corner, the only thing I wrote down was the thing we talked about way back at the beginning, which is, why are you taking Chakotay down with you? You're supposed to, either the captain should go down or the first officer should go down. Both of you shouldn't go down. You've left Harry in charge, and look what he did.
Well, and he's the most junior of the senior staff.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would say if you're taking Chakotay, you'd want to leave Tuvok on there.
Yeah, you needed to leave one of those guys up there. I agree.
Yeah.
And, B'Elanna is even more reckless sometimes than Janeway, so she's not the one either. But she's also not the member of the bridge crew, right?
Well, I would say, Scotty used to take control of the bridge every now and then.
Yeah.
I would say also B'Elanna's problem is she hasn't had the full Starfleet training. She did go to the academy, but she didn't complete it. Yeah. So she would be a riskier pick. Not that she isn't capable of it. She would just maybe not be the first choice because of the lack of training.
Right. Well, because this is a part 1 of 2, it's hard to completely analyze and rate because we also need to see the rest of it. But I guess just going on this part of it, if we do rating, thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral, what is your rating?
I think this is an absolute thumbs up. This is a great building story. There's nothing really in it where you just go, oh, really? It's a lot better than the last 2-parter we had.
Right.
I think this works as a good time travel story. Feels very Star Trek. There's a great sort of sense of humor in this episode, as well as having a pretty good villain.
Yeah.
With a great henchman, who I don't even think gets any lines.
Yeah, the episode itself has a really great tone.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost hard to describe, yeah.
If I was to describe it, I feel it has a tone like the Whale movie.
A little bit. Not quite as funny, but
No.
yeah.
Well, that had a lot more time to play for laughs.
Right. Yeah, this has 46 minutes, yeah.
But the vibe seems to work. So yeah, thumbs up. I was looking forward to this one.
Oh, I agree. Thumbs up. I found it very entertaining. Ed Begley Jr. is a surprisingly good villain. I didn't remember him being so good, but he's really good in that role.
Yeah.
When we get towards the end of the episode, because I knew it was a part one, what always happens is the absolute worst case scenario at the end of part one, right? Things are bad and they have to get worse. But then right when we get to the end, Janeway and Chakotay get beamed away. And I'm like, oh, that's not what's going to happen because we're right at the end there. And then, oh, nope, it is what happens because the villain then gets access to Voyager and downloads a bunch of stuff. And yeah, now everything's bad. And we're on the news and everything's bad.
And the doctor's missing.
So it was a very good ending to set us up for part two. Yeah.
It's a good Trek cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. And it does follow that thing of like, you're at your darkest moment when it goes into to be continued.
Yeah, I always think there's big anticipation of episodes like this where they go back to the present day.
Yeah.
But I think quite frequently they can be super cheesy, but this is very entertaining. I liked it a lot. I look forward to how it ends.
I absolutely agree. And I do love Janeway with I wanted to stay away from time travel. We talk about what we do remember in the series. I remember the time travel episodes, and I'm like, that's pretty funny considering what's going to happen in the future. So,
well, and I guess they do that on purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that wraps up Season 3, Episode 8. Come back next week for Episode 9. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com. We are also on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and YouTube at ReBingeIT, and you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.